Everybody. This is Pastor Sean, come to you live with another episode of Death Church Radio. Death Church Radio podcast on the Stookie Show on Facebook, BitChute, YouTube, whole bunch of different streaming services, Trovo, Vimeo, like it's all over the place. What I'm going to be doing today, which I haven't done in about a year now, after making the first episode of going through the entire chapter of First One for Dave Rubin's Don't Burn This Book. Today, we're doing the audio book I'm going to be reading the entirety of chapter 2 with throwing in, I guess, my 2 cents. I'm going to be chiming in every time I just see something that, I don't know, pops out to me or something like that. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started here. So, chapter 2, embrace your wake-up call. They say the first step to recovery is admitting that there's a problem. This, therapists believe, is crucial because denial ain't just a river in Egypt. It's something that keeps people trapped in a cycle of dysfunction with no motivation to change ever. Unfortunately, breaking through years of self-deception can be tough. The prospect of so much heavy lifting often puts people off, causing them to double down into themselves rather than to push through to the other side. But by virtue of the fact you're here now, we've already established this isn't you. Usually at this point in the recovery process, when someone first acknowledges his or her issues and tries to unpack them, programs such as Alcoholics Anonymous will insist that the person stops drinking. This is different. I want you to get sober through compulsive thinking. That's right, people. I want you to walk into a bar and order yourself a full-bodied opinion. Okay, get that there? I want you to get absolutely wasted on facts until 3 a.m. And then, when you're just about ready to pass out, I want you to get another large glass of reality and chug it. I then want you to have intellectual binges that are so wild you go missing for days. Eventually, waking up on a stranger's sofa, hungover on reality. Okay, this technically makes me your enabler. But that's cool because, spoiler alert, you're not the problem here. It's what you're not doing. Chances are you've seen all the red flags throughout the past few years, but failed to react appropriately out of loyalty, optimism, and a fear that if addressed, the fallout could be toxic. You're worried about losing friends, the prospect of awkward family dinners, and what perfect strangers might say to you on Facebook. But that fear has ended, or that fear has to end, and it has to end now. Yeah, which is, with someone like me, because it talks about, it seems like obviously, and I don't know if I've said this in the previous video, I have no idea, I never rewatched it, but when it comes to it's like the equivalent of like what's talked about in the New Testament of like a baby Christian, that the baby Christians are the ones that drink milk, and the ones who have been in the faith for a while are expected to be eating the full portions of like a regular meal. So I believe that, I'm taking a guess that Dave Rubin has written this book for people who are just getting introduced to the idea of, I'm assuming, conservatism, I'm taking a guess, or what he has called classical liberalism. I actually don't know. I'm taking a guess there. Because when reading through the second chapter here, this is not really for someone like me who does what is taught in the book of Proverbs and walks circumspectly. Okay. So I'm thinking this is like a pamphlet book for someone who is maybe stumbling onto a show for the first time. I'm taking a guess. But anyways. Ooh, got bad heartburn right now. Anyways. See, there was no reason to believe that you will ever be braver than you are right now. In fact, chances are you'll become less brave as time goes on. I don't know about that. And if you miss the boat, there's a good chance you'll end up stranded. So, to help you achieve what shrinks call the breakthrough, excuse me, consider the book the literary equivalent of a hazmat suit, except rather than handle radioactive chemicals, you'll face a truth that's only hazardous to your health if you continue to ignore this. The left is no longer liberal. So, yeah, I mean, to someone who is seasoned, or I guess you would say a veteran in, I don't know, researching all different types of politics and whatnot, this might come off to you as something that you've already heard a million times already. Let's continue. I mean, the left is no longer liberal. It's like, I mean, it's kind of been apparent since like, what, 2015? But anyways, once upon a time, the left was truly liberal. Liberals used to champion the rights of women, black people, and gays. They fought for all marginalized groups to be equal under the law. This was authentic liberalism based on individual rights, and that was a damn good thing. Unfortunately, this is no longer the case. Trust me. This is not some random assumption I've pulled out of thin air. It's a sober conclusion I've reluctantly reached after years of watching my old team transform into a Bane mob of hysterical Puritans, a federal gang that sows division through identity politics and encourages societal tribes to rank themselves in pecking order of oppression. You know, which is all correct. For the most part. Sorry, I've been having allergies this week. The left's version is a new social order that despises our hard-fought freedoms. Eroding the First Amendment in favor of hate speech laws, promotes socialism, through the redistribution of wealth, so Marxism, and denies scientific fact in order to weaponize the power of feelings by asserting that there are more than two genders, for example. Worst still, they implement all of these things with brute force. Violence, censorship, character assassination, smear campaigns, doxing, trolling, deplatforming, and other witch hunts. Tricks that are deliberately designed to leave people down and out. Ideally, jobless and without the resources to push back. If you see no problem with all of this or even condone it as part of the greater good, then we have some serious work to do. You've got Stockholm Syndrome and need urgent intervention. But if you want a world where people are judged equally by their actions rather than their immutable characteristics such as race, gender, or sexuality, then woohoo, you already are on the right track. You're awake rather than woke. Getting to this point isn't easy. In fact, it usually takes years of hard labor because our factory settings, everything the system teaches us to believe, are programmed into us from a young age. These include a range of 2D arguments that simplify life and position our starting point on the left. Is it still going? Yeah, it is. Okay. Such as Democrats equal good, Republicans equal bad, progressive equals humane, conservatives equals mercilessness, socialists equals generous, and capitalists equals greedy, etc. These presumptions are obviously fallacies, but they're easily swallowed by the idealistic and impressionable youth. The message is even more appealing when it's constantly reinforced through academia, the media, and celebrity, which makes it look cool and credible. Yeah, if you're a peon, I guess that works. That definitely didn't work on me. Years of conditioning take hold before anyone even starts to question whether Barbara Streisand and Cher are wrong about foreign policy, immigration, and free speech. And by then, You're in too deep to simply walk away. It's like a controlling relationship or the hot girl who catfishes on Instagram. Underneath the filter, it's a different story. My personal wake up call happened in 3 parts. All right, so here we're getting to it on page 15. It first began in 2013 when I relocated from New York City to Los Angeles, California in order to join the Young Turks TV network. As a registered Democrat who had only voted for Democrats, including Barack Obama twice, this was a dream come true for me. Finally, I was in a good fight with my fellow liberals. I also did too. I made that mistake. I mean, I'm 33 now. I mean, when Barack Obama first came into office, I don't even think I was able to vote. I mean, I might have been. The second time I tried to vote, the church turned me away. But anyways, I mean, I was going to vote for Barack Obama anyway, so it was a good thing that that didn't happen. Unfortunately, the honeymoon period wore off within the first year after what I imagined the Young Turks to be didn't match the depressing reality. My colleagues positioned themselves as moral guardians of the new media. It quickly became clear to me that they were just pushing propaganda by selectively editing stories to drum up clickbait headlines. I mean, it's all anything that has to do with any kind of mainstream media source does that. I mean, if you guys weren't aware of that, he's probably going to go into more depth in this. You know, anything you read online with any type of news source, you need to take it with a grain of salt. Without ever considering counter narratives or challenging their agenda. In essence, they designed the first model of the dangerous outrage machine that produces what we have come to call the fake news. In the beginning, I dismiss this and always try to push the narrative back into the center while discussing whatever political dramas were big at the time. But every debate seemed to end with somebody somewhere being called a bigot for just having a different opinion. Simply put, no matter what the conversation was about, there was always a smear on hand to shame someone into silence. At first, I believed these accusations, and why wouldn't I? There's no smoke without fire, right? Wrong. These became abundantly clear to me when the network's main host, Cenk Uygur, launched a scathing attack on conservative commentator David Webb. In the heated segment about racism, Uygur described Webb, who's black but questions the narrative that America is a white supremacist nation, as an Uncle Tom of the conservative movement, adding he betrayed his African American roots in order to succeed in white society. David, I hate to tell you, but you're still black. He spat on the camera one day. You can be their bitch all day long, but if anything happens to you, Fox News will deny your white shooter. Foaming at the mouth and wide-eyed, Uygur then invited his co-host to join the pile-on. They need a little encouragement to smear Webb as Tucker Carlson's bitch, and even implied he'd sold out his own children. He would sell out his own children to get a media career. He's Fox News' very own mouthpiece for anti-black sentiments. Members of the crew said it's not an easy statement for us to make unless it's completely earned. Little did they know that I knew better. Webb was actually an old friend of mine, and we went back many years. We'd previously worked together at SiriusXM Radio, and I had appeared on his show to debate hot topics from a liberal standpoint, although the subject matter was sometimes conscientious, we always kept it civil and soon became buddies. In fact, I can tell you 2 things for sure about Webb's career. First, he can knock back bourbons without flinching. That's pretty cool. And second, he's the real deal and truly believes what he says. And not only does he say what he believes, but he can also support his beliefs with facts. Because I knew Webb firsthand, alarm bells began ringing in my head. Here was a good man being lambasted as a fraud by tolerant progressives. Yeah, I mean, it's just, when it comes to stuff like this, it's just, I don't know, man. Like, nowadays when, like, I would watch, I don't know, something on Daily Wire, like, what is it, like, I can't remember their names, like Ben Shapiro, um, what's his name, the writer, I don't remember his name, but, or like watching, I tried to watch the Rubin report yesterday, but ever since he joined the Blaze, it's just, the show's been just so, it's just, it's been so boring, it's like turned into ASMR, but anyways, it's just, I don't know, it's like I'm kind of getting bored reading this, because he's just saying the same things I've heard time and time again, but anyways, let's continue. I couldn't help but wonder, so page 17, why would colorblind progressives be slamming Webb on his ethnicity? Would they have treated him this way if he were a white? Weren't we supposed to be the good guys, the non-racists? Quickly, my co-host's motivation became clear to me. It was character assassination in the name of self-protection. They wanted to kill Webb's credibility before his opinion could slay their entire worldview. To them, he was just an inconvenient black dude who needed to be taken out. Pretty much. I mean, I seriously don't know one person, probably other than my dad, that watches the Young Turks right now, and even what you would consider in their heyday, even then it was like pretty cringy and virtually unwatchable, but I don't know, I guess that's just my opinion. Anyways, fortunately, I knew Webb was a good guy and nothing of what the Young Turks crew claimed him to be. As a result, I was disgusted by their behavior, but my feelings of revulsion were wrapped up in confusion, which initially kept me from speaking up. Looking back, this makes me want to go back in time and slap the 2013 me repeatedly. But at least it was the beginning of my awakening and gave me an unpleasant jolt that I needed. So I'm starting to understand now, for the last paragraph here. So Dave Rubin is basically, this book is like, it's as if he wrote this and he's giving this book here to his 2013 self. So, okay, I'm understanding it now. Okay. The second flashpoint even came soon after. It happened in late 2014 when neuroscientist and author Sam Harris appeared on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher to discuss his book, Waking Up: A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. Those who aren't familiar with the show's format, Harris, whom I'd never heard of at this point, was brought on for a protected interview. This meant that he wasn't expected to converse with the other guests, including Ben Affleck, who was only booked for a one-on-one with Maher. The interview started off fine, but quickly got hijacked when Harris made the reasonable distinction between criticizing people and ideas, including religious beliefs. We've been sold the same meme of Islamophobia, where criticism of the religion gets conflated with bigotry towards Muslims as people, he said. It's intellectually ridiculous. But anyone had time to draw breath, and agitated Affleck jumped in. But instead of contributing to the conversation like a grown-up, he basically shouted Bill Maher down and called them racist, which has now become a standard debating tactic for most progressives. Yeah, I mean, these things are correct. It's true. It's just, I've just heard this like so many times, but all right. Are you the person who officially understands the confided doctrine of Islam? Affleck peacocked at Harris. The audience fell silent. Why are you so hostile? Maher replied. Perturbed? Because it's gross and racist. Affleck shot back, hackles raised, like a toddler having a tantrum and throwing his toys out of the stroller. I should point out here that this tactic is typically of people who don't know what they're talking about. Instead of having a solid argument based on facts, they simply moralize their way through life, shouting people down and throwing loaded terms around as a distraction. Like, I agree but disagree. All right, page 19. Their over-the-top emotion is enough to convince unthinking people on a base level. They won. Because it appears as if that they are morally right. Keen to capture this incident in the moment, I leapt from my sofa, grabbed my notebook, and began scribbling down thoughts as the conversation continued to derail. Suddenly, everything I'd been thinking privately about the dysfunction of the progressive mind was bursting forth right in front of my eyes. And not only that, but this manifestation of lefty hysteria lefty hysteria was Batman versus both my favorite comedian and a mild-mannered scientist. I had never seen anything like it. Bill Maher's your favorite comedian. Ugh. You guys remember that, like, remember when Mos Def came on his show back, I think when it was called Politically Correct, and he was going against, I don't know if Mos Def, the rapper, was going against the notion of that we shouldn't go to war in the Middle East. And then Maher did the whole, he put up the whole Mono Cornuto thing right there. All right, go. I mean, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look it up. It's like he was messaging to, I don't know, his real bosses or something like that. He was messaging to them through the TV that he had the situation under control kind of thing. So anyways, I mean, it's just my opinion. I'm just, Anyways, let's continue. I mean, that actually does make sense if Bill Maher's his favorite comedian and, Dave Rubin's comedy itself is... Anyways, I love the guy. Like, I'm a big fan of Dave Rubin, but his comedy, oh man. I tried to watch his comedy special. It was from like 2012 or something, or 13. It was on Hulu. And it was him and like 3 or 4 other gays, I think. And I don't know. Dave Rubin, I mean, his style of comedy is not for me. I'll just put it like that. Still ranting, Affleck became increasingly red-faced and short-tempered as he gave the performance of his life, playing to the gallery. More than 1 billion people, Muslims, aren't fanatical. He added, only missing Harris's point, it's stereotyping. It was crazy to watch a seemingly respected and evolved adult behave this way, especially when the media's subsequent reaction was equally nuts. I don't know, man. It's just, but it's it's like my brother was telling me this one time that, that guy from the Smashing Pumpkins, he bought the NWA, forgot his name, Billy Corgan, him, when he was on the show, and I think this was when it was politically incorrect with Bill Maher, and the audience was laughing and jeering at things that Bill was saying, and then Billy Corgan said, well, Bill, it's your audience. I mean, they're going to act accordingly. And then he got really defensive about that. It's like, it's like when you go to someone's show and you kind of have a cult of personality, they're going to go on. And also, behind the stage, it has the big light that says applause on it. It's like it's kind of like MK Ultra a little bit, but like a very boiled down version of it. I don't know. Most people are piano keys. I'm sorry, Jordan Peterson. Anyways, so specifically, the media turned to Maher overnight. For years, I had been standard bearer of the left. He'd long supported the legalization of pot, universal health care, global warming initiatives, and vote Democrat. He'd also been fiercely outspoken about Republicans throughout his 30-year career. Nonetheless, Maher instantly became public enemy number 1 after Affleck played the race card. The entire media establishment now hated him, with newspapers such as The Guardian painting him as a zealot. It didn't matter how much he'd supported left-wing politics before or how much he'd scolded conservatives. All that was disqualified when Maher was now put into the other category. How many pages are left? Oh, okay, not too many. All right, about 10 pages. Looking back, I should probably thank Affleck for this. He inadvertently became the blunt instrument that hit sane people over the head. Yes, it was an alarm bell for me. and unfair to Marr and Harris, but his 8-minute clip was also a political awakening for millions of others. Once seen, it couldn't be unseen. I mean, obviously, I agree with that. That's pretty good. As the press attention calmed, I hoped the incident would cause progressives to look in the mirror, self-correct, and moderate their behavior. Sadly, this didn't happen. In fact, it only got worse. Just a few months later, Paris was rocked by terrorist attacks against satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Which became the third and final event that led to my awakening. For centuries, France had enjoyed a rich history of satire, way before the French Revolution in 1789, which saw Marie Antoinette roasted for her bling lifestyle as poor Parisians, starved buffoons would often poke fun at the establishment, including royalty. Yeah, I didn't understand any of that. Later, these crazy gestures were replaced by writers, and as technology advanced, other forms of satire began to emerge. By 1970, Hebdo was born. The magazine embodied everything a healthy society should, and had no sacred cows, and was an equal opportunist with poking fun at power. Yeah, until it was like 40. I think it was like 50%, 40% of the people working for that magazine were murdered. Well, that's what happens when you mess with Islam. I mean, I was just talking to my friend, my supervisor. I was talking about this subject with him the other day. It's, that's one thing I do really respect and like about Muslims that live over there, and like, most of the population, like in Lebanon and like places in Saudi Arabia, Iran, like places like that. These are the rules of society, and we're not deviating from this. So and if you do, we're going to stone you until you die, okay? We don't have that here in America, and I think it would actually really... Never mind. Okay, so this is how it's supposed to be. If we're going to confront reality, honestly, then nothing can be off limits. Our power structures, our political leaders, and our religious institutions all must be fair game in this free society. There's a fine line when jokes and mockery become cruel and pointless, but this is the line comedians have to toe since the beginning of time. We must relentlessly defend our ability to not only push our limits, but also to occasionally trip over the line into sacrilege and controversy. Okay? Hold on. Allergies are really hitting me hard this week. Anyways. All right, page 21. Opposition to this belief turned into tragedy on January 7th, 2015, when two Al-Qaeda operatives, Saeed and Sharif Kawachi, stormed the magazine's editorial offices with Kalashnikov rifles and opened fire, killing 12 innocent people. I wouldn't necessarily say they're innocent, but continuing, some suggested victims were shot in the face at point-blank range to ensure maximum gore, while others said staff played dead next to their slaughtered colleagues in order to survive. Their blood-stained bodies entangled with corpses. The motive? Editors had republished cartoons of Muhammad with the killers considered sacrilegious. Well, so I actually remember, I completely forgot about the Charlie Hebdo thing. So I remember what the cover of the magazine was that led to that shooting. It was someone that was dressed in ISIS garb in the desert, and the Prophet Muhammad was in one of those, not guillotine, but one of those like medieval devices that would keep the hands and head. It's like something like that. And the guy was about to cut his head off. So anyways, all right, let's continue. This horrific incident plunged France into national mourning, with then President Francis Holland calling it an attack on free speech. World leaders even joined more than 1 million people on the streets of Paris in peaceful protest. But instead of voicing unequivocal condemnation of the terrorists, like any sane person would, my fellow leftists defended them. Yup, you read that correctly. They defended the criticism of the gunmen would be Islamophobic and implied the dead had it coming for being provocative. Well, I mean, okay, so I'm a defender of free speech. I mean, that should be obvious. But you they had to have known that there was a possibility that something like this was going to happen. So I'm not saying what happened to them being murdered was justified. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, like, you know, it's like, oh, the stove was on fire, but let me go ahead. I'm going to fill this bucket up with grease and I'm going to throw it at it. Like, oh, wonder what's going to happen. You know, it's just common, you know, you have to have that, not common sense, but you should have that expectation if you're going to write extreme things. The extreme things are going to happen to you, which I don't know. I mean, that's, like, once again, it's just my opinion. It's fine. At the very moment, I realized just how high these stakes were. The left had lost it to a dangerous degree. If a member of the Westboro Baptist Church had opened fire in the U.S. mosque, in a U.S. mosque, leftists would be all over it, declaring racism an epidemic, with Christianity to blame. But in this case, they blamed the cartoonists, excused the murderers, and showed more sympathy for the Muslim community rather than the the deceased, whose bodies were still warm. Of course, virtually all of mainstream media took the bait. Various outlets, from BuzzFeed to the Huffington Post, ran with this warped response. And as the world mourned with the French people, I distinctly recall CNN asking whether it was acceptable to draw cartoons of religious figures, something it had no problem with when Hebdo previously depicted the Pope holding a condom and Kim Jong-un flanked by a bare butt. Yeah, well, it was an extreme magazine. That was the point. But yeah, it's because all right, these things happen. It's just like what's going on in the news right now of, well, when our president, Joe Biden, states that the main threat to our national security are white supremacists, when that is, you don't even have to do that much research to figure out why that doesn't make any sense. So this is all pre-planned by people that are behind closed doors. Okay? So these are all things, and if you want to, you know, it's like, oh, Pastor Sean, what are you talking about? Just go ahead and look up Bohemian Grove. But there are people that are billionaires and millionaires, and all these different, you know, bankers, presidents, musicians, artists, poets, certain people that are high up in our society, financial-wise, dictate what happens in our news and what happens around the world. Okay? So let's continue. That's why that's there. So suddenly, out of nowhere, rationalizing Islamic terror had become a progressive position. According to progressives, it was another 2D argument. Brown people equals good and white people equals bad. These three incidences, the attack on my friend David Webb, Ben Affleck's self-righteous moralizing, the sort only an A-list Hollywood star could do, and the desire of obfuscate Islamic terror, became the holy trinity of left-wing lunacy that set me on course to divorcing the deluded from my life. Initially, I thought I was alone in my political awakening. and feared that it might always be this way, but soon enough, others got mugged by reality. Professor Brett Weinstein was one of them, a revered academic at Evergreen State College in Washington, arguably the most woke school in America. Weinstein was a die-hard progressive who earned his credentials supporting the Occupy Wall Street protests and even begged forgiveness for merely voting in the 2016 election. No kidding. Yeah, I did too. It would be pointless to attempt to apologize to everyone who might have been hurt by my vote, he wrote for Medium.com. But I believe it is important to go through the exercise of genuinely recognizing the harm my choice invited and to signify that I understand the debt it implies. Okay, that's a little weird. You might think this would safeguard him from the mob, especially as he voted for Clinton, not Trump, but you'd be wrong. They still sacrificed him in May of 2017 when he opposed racial segregation. For context, Evergreen College has long held a day of absence in which people of color boycott the campus to protest racism. Oh, man. As a die-hard progressive, Weinstein always supported this, but he objected when activists flipped the script and wanted all the white people, both faculty and students, to leave the college for 24 hours as admission of their supremacy. And then we find out why there literally is no point in going to college unless you're either going to become a doctor or you're going to become a lawyer. Just go get a trade school degree. There's no reason to go to any of these Ivy League or whatever. Where is he from? Evergreen State College. There is no point in anyone going here for any reason, okay? I mean, just get a trade school degree. So, anyways. He politely refused, saying he understood their motives but questioned the approach. Choosing to not attend classes is one thing, he said, but forcing others out is another. As you might have guessed, this reasoned response caused mass hysteria. Think The Walking Dead, but more with zombies. Gangs of students, most of whom he never taught, began protesting his office, hurling accusations of racism and demanding to be sacked for having a different opinion. They even stopped traffic and searched cars while carrying baseball bats. Well, yeah, I mean, that's what happens when these people that work at the colleges put a battery in your back and you already live under the cloud of self-entitlement. That's what this is. It's this, Antifa, like Black Lives Matter. It's all the same. This is all coming from the same source, okay? And it's not godly. It is not good. Eventually, the witch hunt had got so bad that Weinstein and his wife Heather Hayne, also a biology professor at Evergreen, were forced from their jobs and banished into exile almost overnight. I tried to reason with these students. I felt no fear because I knew that whatever my failings might be, bigotry was not among them. He later told Congress in a special address. At that moment, I felt sure I could reach them. I felt a moral obligation to explain that racism squanders potential and erodes dignity. I'm also well versed in the evolutionary logic that makes racism durable, so should have had no trouble establishing common ground. But the protesters had no interest in the very dialogue that they seemed to invite. Yeah, well, it's because it's a love of chaos. It's like the energy of a nutcase woman. But anyways, their ultimate goal, he says, is to silence dissent, and they're succeeding. One's right to speak is now dictated by adherence to an ascendant orthodoxy in which one's race, gender, and sexual orientation are paramount. or paramount. Weinstein added, "This is about power and control. Speech is impeded as a last resort when people fail to censor themselves in response to a threat. This tactic is being used to unhook the values that bind us together as a nation: equal protection under the law and the presumption of innocence, a free marketplace of ideas. The concept that people should be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. Yes, even that core tenet of the civil rights movement is being dismantled." Brett and his wife Heather reluctantly settled with Evergreen State and fled Washington altogether, which is terrifying. If it can happen to them, two lifelong progressives, it can happen to you too. Yeah, but see, the thing is, I don't care. He had a lot to lose. I don't. Even if I had a lot to lose, I'm firmly grounded in the knowledge of Christ. As long as I have a Bible, for the most part, I'm fine. This whole place could burn down and I'd probably be upset maybe like 2 or 3 days about it. If Christ is your foundation, you don't really need anything else. But anyways, if it happens to me, it's like, oh well, you know. It talks about in the Bible that there's going to be persecution. Well, okay, I don't want to misquote it. I'm just saying, if you pursue truth, you're going to get persecuted. It's just what it is. A similar fate awaited graduate student and teaching assistant Lindsay Shepard. Sorry, another lifelong lefty. Well, I don't know about that. She was like 20, 21 years old. Another lifelong lefty was branded transphobic when lecturing a class at Wilfrid Laurier University in Ontario, Canada. Unless I'm thinking of somebody else. Anyways, the accusation came after she dared to show footage of a little-known Canadian psychology professor named Jordan Peterson discussing gender pronouns. For your information, Peterson had repeatedly stated that he is fully supportive of transgender rights. He just doesn't want government-enforced rules upon speech. Excuse me. One of those parts I disagree with. Raked over the coals in a disciplinary meeting. Shepard was accused of I'm not good at talking. Anyways. Accused by senior staff of creating a toxic climate for students, quote unquote, and enforcing heteronormative standards. Ugh. Wisely, she secretly recorded the conversation, which later saved her ass from a number of crazy accusations, namely that her behavior was contrary to both the university's policy on sexual violence and the Ontario Human Rights Code. And I remember actually listening to that when I was driving to the mall in Tucson. I was driving to the Park Place Mall, and I remember listening to her. She had the phone in her purse or something like that. That's pretty crazy. An investigation later revealed that no such breaches ever happened. What did happen, however, was that she bravely stood up to the mob and survived. Later that same year, leftists went after a new target, software engineer James Damore. Okay, I'm not sure who that is. This time, however, it wasn't honorable students or morally corrupt academics who were leading the charge. It was Silicon Valley, the gatekeepers of all the information we consume. Damore's targeting happened after he provided feedback on Google's diversity program, which claims STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is rife with sexism. In a now famous memo titled "Google's Ideological Echo Chamber: How Biased Clouds Are Thinking About Diversity and Inclusion." I mean, okay. When you hear anybody, especially if it's a big tech company, and the word inclusion or diversity comes up, you don't don't read it. There is no point in doing any research on that. It is ridiculous, and you're going to put that in the ridiculous category, okay? It's like postmodernism as a political philosophy. You are not to take that seriously. So, anyways, where was I at? Damore counter-argued that the genders are biologically different and as a result often gravitate toward different careers. Not always, but generally speaking. Furthermore, he said this was okay. Biology isn't bigotry, people. I should clarify here that Damore was a model employee before this fiasco. Not only had he been headhunted from Harvard, but also he'd been promoted just months before. Just before Memo Gate. Furthermore, his observations were rooted in science, not sexism. Researchers at the University of Missouri have found a gender equality paradox when they studied 475,000 teenagers across the globe. They noted that hyper-regularitarian countries such as Finland, Norway, and Sweden had a smaller percentage of female STEM. How many more pages here? Okay, 3 more. Graduates than countries such as Albania and Algeria, which are considered less advanced. In other words, the more gender equality a place had, the more men and women chose traditional gender roles. But none of this mattered to one of the world's biggest companies, Google, which fired Damore in August of 2017. Well, yeah, Google's like CBS. All of these are this. If you people don't know, all these are the same company. It's the same people, just like a flesh and blood Android copy of like Google and Yahoo and like all these places. It's like the same person over and over again. So it's like the CBS. You ever watch that in the morning, Good Morning America or whatever, and they have the I next to what's her name, Gail King and whoever's on the show. It's all the same thing. So, anyways. Part of building an open, inclusive environment means fostering a culture in which those with alternative views, including different political views, feel safe sharing their opinions, says Google's VP of Diversity, Danielle Brown. But that discourse needs to work alongside the principles of equal employment found in our Code of Conduct, policies, and anti-discrimination laws. In other words, free speech is good unless you say something bad. Poor George Orwell must have been spinning in his grave. Haha. Animal Farm is a great book, by the way. Anyways, making matters worse, journalists then painted Damore as a sexist pig who revels in controversy, which could not have been further from the truth. He hadn't written that memo for attention or notoriety. He was simply doing his due diligence as an employee by providing the feedback they'd requested from a mandatory meeting they'd hosted. Hardly insensitive for other employees to provide feedback in the future. When Damore appeared on the Rubin Report a few weeks later, he was the most revered, unassuming, and timid guest I'd ever had. I personally had to spend 30 minutes in the green room trying to get him to relax before we began recording. Something I've never done before or since with anyone else. He's probably an introvert. I'm not saying the introverts are weak or anything. I'm just saying he's probably like me. He's high in openness. But the whole debacle was unnecessary, but I developed mixed feelings about this specific incident. Naturally, I was appalled by Google's spineless behavior. But it also had an upside, like a silver lining behind a storm cloud. It confirmed that what I expected all along, that the problem was the progressive left, not me. Pretty much. Yeah, it's like 90% correct. Better still, I was an extraordinarily good company with some genuine free thinkers and amazing minds. This unconstitutional sense of community is one of the best benefits of being rejected or expelled by progressives, but it's certainly not the only one. So in case you're not aware of them, let me tell you about some of the other surprising upsides. First, there are now millions of us out here, which means somebody always got your back. And how do I know this? Because I've met many of the people who are now us from the streets of Amsterdam to the supermarkets of Australia and the crowded trains of Copenhagen. I've had frank conversations with good folks who also been cast out for having original thoughts. One was a member of the gay men's choir in Los Angeles who was cold-shouldered from the group after being outed as a log cabin conservative. Another was an Emmy Award-winning set designer who'd been a straight white man, was told his services were no longer required because a person of color would do a better job. I mean, yeah, this is all a part of an agenda, okay? A third was a woman in London who reluctantly removed her child from school because of the abuse he got for his Brexit voting family. The one thing they all had in common, once they survived the initial shame and pain of rejection, they all viewed their banishment as a blessing in disguise. Why? Because it finally opened their eyes to the reality of the situation. It stopped them from playing a tedious game that they could never win because it's designed to fail. Last page of chapter 2. We're going to go through this whole freaking book, okay? I owe Dave Rubin that respect. They all notice that it's so much cooler out here on the fringe, which is true. Free thinking is the new counterculture, which makes it cutting edge and subversive, like punk rock or hip hop in the early 1980s. It's on the periphery where all the sexy, rebellious, and exciting stuff happens. Not the mainstream center left, which has become like an R-rated movie stripped down to PG for a minimum offense. Yeah, I guess. Last but not least, here's the best bit. Independent thinking actually makes you more attractive. No kidding. Brains are sexy. See, groupthink is basic and it's not hot. It requires absolutely no thought, no courage, no chutzpah. Conversely, owning your own mind is infinitely more appealing. Trust me, beauty fades, but dumb is forever. This is all worth remembering when you inevitably face your own experience with a progressive mob, if you haven't already, of course. You might be a kid who's scared to speak up in class, a lipstick lesbian who dares to champion the Second Amendment, or a Trump supporter who lives in the People's Republic of California. Wherever your story, it's all good. The left may no longer be liberal, but you're no longer left out. Okay, I forgot where I put the bookmark at. Oh man, I'm always losing things. That's not it. Okay, whatever. All right, so that is chapter 2 of today's reading, and we got a lot to get through. So there's 217 pages in this book, but Jordan Peterson recommends it, and you know how psychology-wise I'm a Petersonian in the realm of psychology. But all right, so tomorrow I'm going to be doing, or if I can't do it tomorrow because I might be busy working, because I got 2 jobs now, I'll be doing that as soon as I can, I guess. But if I can't, I'm going to do it Friday. All right, so thank you guys for watching, and God bless.